The topic is overcoming challenges in traceability. Our moderator, Bill, who you've all met this morning, will be leading the panel. So coming up and take the show, lead the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back.
Thank you.
Sam?
Yep.
Hey, good to see you.
All right, before I introduce our distinguished panel, a little bit more about me, very briefly. Oh, do we have the clicker? Oh,
Clicker.
thank you. I have about 40 years plus experience in food safety training. I've worked with governments around the world in developing curriculum and training and presentations. I work with non-government organizations and government organizations. I've worked in academia. I've worked all the way from farm all the way to the processors and with consumers as well. Who here likes free stuff? Okay, come on, hands up, okay? Remember, hands up. All right. Oh, it's not showing up here. All right. So, Food Safety Preventative Control Alliance. Does anyone who know anything about them? All right, I see a hand, couple hands. Ladies and gentlemen, they have a lot of free materials. Free. They specialize. They have one on foreign suppliers. On December 12th, they have a free webinar with limited capacity. Free. Please sign up, and they talk about recalls. So my distinguished guest today is Jeff Hall, Food Safety Specialist from the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, and Sam Davidson, Director of Food Safety from the Atchison Group. All right, welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Jeff, would you like to get started?
Sure. So just a little bit about myself. First of all, I've never been called distinguished before in my life, and I don't expect it to happen again. CPMA is the largest fresh fruit and vegetable association in Canada. We've got approximately 900 members. Most of them, about 60%, are here in Canada. The other 40% are in the US and around the world globally. We look at the industry at a national and from a global perspective. My role within the organization, as noted, I'm the food safety specialist. So, anytime you hear about a recall on lettuce or carrots or cucumbers, as it seems to be the thing in vogue right now, please think of me and smile. I also look after the innovation work that we do at CPMA. So, want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, my name's Sam Davidson. I'm Director of Food Safety with the Atchison Group. We are a food safety consulting group, global food safety consulting group. We have a number of people in Canada, majority in the US, and we have our first physical office in India, just opened this week. So we would work, you name it, around food safety. We work with, for training, for PCQI training. We help in the event of a recall. We help when there's regulatory issues and just sometimes when people need some help with food safety plans or HACCP plans, we get involved and basically anything to do with around food and food safety.
All right, thank you very much. One of the questions that we have is how are the new US regulations affecting us here in Canada?
So maybe I'll just give a quick overview of the regs, just to kind of level set everyone to a certain degree. So under FSMA Division 204, they talk about their traceability requirements. And the US uses slightly different language than we use here. They call them rules. So you'll hear the term FSMA 204 or Rule 204. They're really talking about their traceability information. The coming into force date is January 20th of 2026, and the industry's been told that there are no extensions to that, so basically everything has to be in place January 20th, 2026. The American approach, or the US approach, is very different than the Canadian approach Here we've got the one up, one down system, which we've all kind of been familiar with if you've done any kind of food safety or quality stuff over the years and tracked product through. The US is using a very different system where they've identified a couple of different categories. One is, well, there's really three things. One is they call the FTL, which is the Food Traceability List. So if you are dealing with a commodity that is on that list, then you are responsible for complying with Rule 204, FSMA 204. Part of that regulation are two terms you're going to hear a lot. The first is the CTE. I always get these mixed up. Critical Tracking Events. So those are laid out in the regulation and basically says if you do this activity or this activity or this activity, here's the things you're responsible for, either creating or moving along with the product. The second thing are the key data elements, KDEs. So you'll hear that. Those are the specifics that you're required to pass to your trading partners along the supply chain. And depending on where you are in that chain, you will have different responsibilities. One of the key areas to look at if you're further down the chain has to do with if you are transforming a product. So if you're taking a product from the original, in our world, we call them RACs, so raw agricultural commodities, lettuce, carrots, peppers, whatever. If you're taking that and then putting it into, let's say, a sandwich, right, which is then going to be sold someplace, you have to make sure you capture all of that information as well. So that's just a quick overview. Like all government regulations, you have to have your policies in place, you have to have your traceability records in place, you have to have your traceability program, which basically explains what you're doing and why you're doing it. So that's kind of the big picture on it.
Thank you.
Sam?
Good.
Sam, what do you think about meeting the requirements as a Canadian producer?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, as Jeff mentioned, if your product is on the food traceability list, you must comply with the traceability rule if you are exporting into the US. The big thing is really to understand the rule. It's a US FDA rule, and the terminology is different, and it's understanding these key parts, as Jeff just mentioned here. Understanding it, implementing it, and then testing it. That's always one of the things that we sometimes are a little bit weaker on, is the testing part, and like a thorough testing of it, to ensure that you're going to comply with it and you're not going to come into any issues if you ever get involved in an issue with the FDA and any traceability requirements.
Further to that point for either of you, will FDA be checking
Sure.
foreign suppliers, and at what frequency, or have you seen them?
There is a lot of work going on around foreign supplier verification program with the FDA. Currently, not with the traceability rule, but if you get involved with it, or if you have a product that needs to go through that traceability exercise, the FDA will be visiting you to make sure that you have all the right documents in place. The CTEs and the KDEs that Jeff explained, they will want to see the evidence of all of that.
So certainly, obviously, same here as in the US, don't have any problems, don't draw any attention to yourself, and the odds of being audited or having issues with government are greatly reduced. Certainly, if you are involved in any kind of an outbreak situation, if your product is going from Canada to the US, FDA will be calling you and wanting to see that information. They do have a requirement that the information has to be available within 24 hours. And they also have information that says it has to be in a format that is sortable. So sending them a bunch of locked PDF documents isn't going to do it. You're going to have to send them an Excel spreadsheet or something that they can manipulate to draw out the information that they need. So.
All right, thank you. Who here has ever been part of a recall? Put your hands up, don't be embarrassed. It's part of life. When I'm doing instructions, it's not if it will occur, it's when it will be occurred. So you need to be prepared. Who here has done a mock recall? Hands up, baby, hands up. All right. What is the importance of a mock recall for traceability?
Well, I guess, and I heard someone mention that earlier, a mock recall, we tend to do the traceability one step forward, one step back. The FDA rule is more granular than that, and it really goes right to the source. One of my colleagues had said before that when you talk about the traceability rule, you're looking at what to exclude rather than what to include. So in a recall scenario, you want to try and get everything you can. You want to ensure that nothing gets out to a consumer. For this traceability exercise with FSMA 204, they want to see what really is the issue. So they're trying to exclude everything you can, to pinpoint it at a very granular level to find that source of potential contamination.
So I've always kind of thought of the mock recall, excuse me, as kind of your test run in the event that something may happen. And like we all hope we're not going to have a recall, but you know, I've got a retail and a lab background, and you know, anybody here who's a retailer knows you're dealing with them all the time. So the key really is that if you've gone through the process before, right, you've started to identify some of the gaps in your information. You've started to find out the areas where, geez, we didn't get that information we needed as quickly as we wanted to. So it really helps you to kind of pull in everybody from your organization to really identify what is important to them and what needs to get out. And a mock recall and your recall procedure in general, it has to involve all elements of your organization, right? You have to have your sales folks there because they're the ones that are going to be talking to your customers, right? Obviously, you've got to have your QA and food safety folks because they're really the ones that are going to dig into it and try to figure stuff out. You want your communications people there because they're the ones that are going to be talking to the public. And we heard a lot about social media here this morning, right? You want to be able to get ahead of it before anybody on Instagram or anybody on YouTube or anything like that. So it's really important that you've included all those people. So like any major preparation, you want to do those prep works, you want to do those mock recalls to identify any potential gaps and then have an answer for them when they happen. Traceability, like we're talking about here, really big part of that, right? Because you want to make sure you can show government that, okay, here's how things move through the system, right? We sold this to this customer on this date, right? All that sort of information. And the better that information is presented, if it's in a clear, concise, organized manner, it makes it look like you know what you're talking about, which is a really good thing when you're talking to regulators, right? It plays a big role in it. And it also helps you kind of move through things quicker. Because like all things, when you're dealing with the regulator, you try to get them in and get them out as fast as possible, right? So that's why having a mock recall and gone through that, include your people, is really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think it's very important when we visit clients and we talk about recall and mock recalls, and they say, yeah, we've got GFSI, we've gone through a mock recall. It's not a mock recall that GFSI are looking at. They're looking at the traceability part. So many recalls are happening lately, and we've talked to some clients, and they said, what do we do better? How do we help that? And the mock recall, a true mock recall, as Jeff just described, is getting everybody involved. Because when a company goes or has a recall, generally the recall team don't know what they're doing. QA do, or FSQA do, but that's it. And then your legal team, your public relations team, your sales team are all like, well, what do we do? What do we do? The mock recall will teach them what they're supposed to be doing. Recall manuals tend to be like this thick, and nobody wants to read them, right? So, Can you imagine sending one to a sales manager or marketing manager and say, hey, read this, this is what your job's going to be? They're never going to read it, right?
Yeah.
So it's them understanding what their rules are during a recall, and that's the importance of a true mock recall.
Yeah.
All right, another question for everyone. Who can provide all the documentation required for a recall within 24 hours? I don't see a lot of hands up. All right. How much does a recall cost? So this is when when I'm teaching people who want to get into food safety, I said, I'd rather spend $10,000 to remove something in the plant as opposed to $1 million or hundreds of millions of dollars after it leaves my plant. Right? Speaking of which, how many have training for mock recalls and traceability? Hands up again. What is the importance of training? Specifically for mock recalls and traceability.
I'll jump in. I think you want to make sure, and this is part of the requirements in both the Canadian and the US regulations, is you have to have qualified people that are running the programs, right? So part of that qualification, of course, is it can be an education background, it can be, work experience and life experience, but certainly adding to that with some training. You've attended courses, you've come to sessions like this, right? It just adds the validity, sure. So it validates that program, right? Because once again, you've got somebody then that can speak about it intelligently, that understands how it works for their particular establishment. Because it doesn't matter if you're making the exact same product as the company next to you, you have very different systems, you've got very different people, right? So even though you're producing cans of soup, it's going to be a different process. You're going to have different folks that are responsible. So certainly training in all of that kind of area is very important. And if I can just get back a little bit to the point about when a recall happens, and it's really important if people know their roles. Because if somebody already knows their role, they're more likely to carry it out properly. They're more relaxed. It's like, okay, I'm responsible for this, this, and this. So people can understand that, as opposed to, I don't know what to do, everything's all over the place, right? You want to avoid that whenever possible.
What have you found, Sam, with training for recalls in your experience with customers? What is the awareness?
Lacking. It's QA that knows about it, and nobody else really knows about it. I guess I could probably do a little bit of a sales pitch, but we do at the Atchison Group, we provide recall scenario training, where basically we go into a facility, maybe one person knows what's going on, and we create a scenario, and we spend a day with the recall team, and every member of that recall team comes in, and they go through the recall scenario and their roles and responsibilities. Most of the time, they don't know what they should be doing, but by the end of the day, they do.
All right.
So it's training and I guess experience, right? It's sort of similar to a food safety team. You want to have the people that knows what's going on. You want to have the people that have that understanding, and in, say, a corporate scenario, making sure it's the right facility and the right staff, right? So, and they understand what's happening.
All right, thank you. This morning I had a wonderful conversation with a woman called Uma. Uma, can you tell us what your company does as far as food safety training and your experience? I found this excellent.
Okay, thank you everybody. My name is Uma and I work as a QA manager for Pro Ingredients. And we had a lot of issues when we first started doing traceability and mock recall, etc. Because we had people coming and joining our company at different times of the year, etc. So we decided to make this process go through smoothly, a training session. So we started doing it once every month. And after that, we decided to do once every quarter. And right now, after 2 years of doing this, we are amazing at a mock recall right now. Because we go through BRC audits like everybody else. We go through this recall process during our internal audit process too. So we felt that doing this, starting doing it monthly, moving on to quarterly, then doing it every 6 months really helped us. And I also created a work instruction saying exactly how to do a process, how to go in the system and find out what to do and who's responsible. All that helped us a lot. So that's what we did. And 2 years into this now, our team is amazingly doing this very well. So I think we need less than 2 hours to do our mock recall. Very confidently, I can say that sitting here.
Thank you very much for sharing. Any questions from the audience? This is your opportunity. All right, we've got one brave soul out in the corner in the hinterland.
Hi. Just wondering, so for a company that has kind of a robust recall program in place, and that includes, root cause analysis and investigation that would normally get into kind of the traceability piece, does that impact at all on kind of complying with the traceability rule and how it applies to you?
Yeah, it will, but it's the recall program and mock recalls and what you mentioned there are not exactly what the FDA want. They want a little bit more than that. Like we mentioned earlier, talking about tracing one step forward, one step back. They want that granularity. They want to see every step. When we talked about those critical tracking events, they want to see all of that. So it goes that much further back in the system. But a robust recall program will definitely help with the start of that process.
Mm-hmm. So certainly, the more time that's spent within an organization, kind of refining at the procedures you've got and the processes you've got, and having a risk analysis model to follow is excellent, right? Because once again, it helps you, kind of do that. Once the initial shock of a recall is done, and once you've started to wade back through your traceability stuff, you want to be able to do that deeper dive to make sure that you can really understand where the issue started, and that way you can create some real solutions to it, right? Otherwise, you're just back doing the same thing over and over again. So certainly those are key items. The other thing is with a strong traceability program is that it does bring other benefits to an organization, right? So in my world, in fresh produce, there's a program called PTI, which is the Produce Traceability Initiative. It was started, my boss started it, it's got to be close to 20 years ago. And it was designed not from a recall standpoint, but was really designed to help codify and condense the amount of information that was traded between business partners, right? So if I'm the packer and I'm shipping it off to a wholesaler, what's the key information? What's the key data, right, that I need to exchange as business partners, right? What needs to come? So that PTI was certainly part of that. And it's something that's basically accepted all across North America now. When you throw in the recall and now the FSMA 204 on top of it, it's a base to work from, right? So you've already got something that folks are familiar with. They know what it looks like. They understand it. So this is just adding to it. So in our world, we're a little bit, we were close to being there beforehand with respect to 204 because we already had kind of a model to follow, which is kind of nice. I know there's a number of industries where it might be it'll be more of a challenge for sure when it comes to the granularity that's in 204.
Sam, what do you think the economic impact for all this training in order to be 204 compliant will cost people that are exporting to the United States? Let's talk money.
A lot less than if you get into a recall and you mess it up. Obviously, there's going to be training sessions similar to FSVP, similar to PCQI. Those sessions will come out, I'm sure, in due time. I'm not sure when they will, but that will be something that will be approved or pre-approved by FDA. It'll be worth it. I'll say it that. Right.
So the FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification Procedures, I did a course, a refresher course. Traceability was one of the main components. They hammered it to the US. This is what you need. We want to know where the seeds came from. We want to know where the mustard came from. We want to know, everything. They wanted to know everything, right down to the minutest detail.
If I can just jump in again. The nice thing is most of you probably already have most of the information. So I don't think we're recreating the wheel here. I think what we're doing is just figuring out how do you get that into a format, how do you get into a database, how do you get it into a communication vehicle that allows you to move that information, move that data along the stream in an efficient manner, right? So I don't think, I'd be surprised at least if you didn't have all the information. I mean, you might have to dig for it a little bit, right? You may not know every specific detail that you need, but my guess is you've already got it. So you should be able to dig that out and then figure out a way to move it along as needed.
So there's no need to recreate the wheel or rediscover fire. It's all the information's there, but the way in
Yeah.
which you present it
Yeah.
is important.
How you organize it and putting it together so it meets the requirements, yeah.
We create masses of information in the industry, and I don't, hands up anyone here in QA that's actually deleted a record or removed a record, right? No, we create more and more records. So the information that we have it all there, it's just organizing it. And one of the things that the Preventive Controls for Human Foods does in FSMA, it puts a little bit more onus on the suppliers. As a manufacturer, you're receiving products and you're not really sure what's happened with it, how it's been processed. And this is part of what the 204 is doing as well. It's really so that the processor or you as the receiver understands what's going on with those ingredients, how they've been processed, what's been done with them. These critical tracking events, that could be, the key data elements could be temperature of, if it had to be refrigerated, is that being recorded properly? Harvesting situations, seeds, as you mentioned, right? So, yeah.
All right, we have a question here.
Yes, Jeff and Sam, I just wanted you to help me clarify one thing, documentation. What level of documentation do we need? So I want to take up your scenario with the vegetables. So we're talking about complex, taking it to another level. I'm referring to a complex supply chain.
Yeah.
So we have the peppers coming from Mexico, from the farm, that goes to a broker. The broker gives it a new lot number and then ships it to another, like a larger broker who consolidates and ships into Canada. We purchase that material. That material is then brought into a plant where it's applied to different, let's say SAP or some other system you're using. You utilize, you include it into a full container, you get 3 lots, put it into one lot, you put it onto SAP, you put it onto your product, and you ship it to your third-party broker, who then consolidates and ships to your retailer. And it goes to your retailer's warehouse, again, going back to Sobe, or it goes to their warehouse, and then it ships into the retail chain, so a frozen product. What level of documentation will I need for the mock recall? We will get the C of A. Most folks will get the C of A. Is that as far as we go? Or do we need to go further to say that broker who provided a separate lot number, you don't have that original number? And again, if you go back to pharmaceuticals, they're in a much more complicated position because they're going back close to, say, blockchain. They're getting close to that. Is that the type of info we would need, or would the C of A from our broker suffice?
So there's about 40 ways to answer that. Yeah, we don't have that much time. I got a minute and a half.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, first of all, if it's Mexican product, it's coming to Canada, and it's coming through the US in bond, doesn't matter. FSMA doesn't apply. You don't have to worry about it. You just have to worry about the Safe Food for Canadians Act,
No,
right?
sorry,
Because
it's going
coming
into
through.
the U.S. The finished product goes into the U.S.
So if you got peppers that are going into the U.S.,
Yeah.
if they're being imported into the U.S., then whoever's grown the peppers has responsibility of data to move forward with that load to the broker. The broker then has to carry that information forward to whomever they sell to. Obviously, once it hits Canada, FSMA no longer applies, so we're under the Safe Food for Canadians regulations. When it comes to the granularity of the information, it really depends on what's happening with those peppers at each step as it comes along, right? So if they're just coming through whole, then it's really the information that was put together at the farm that comes through. If it's repackaged, then there's information from whoever's doing the packaging in the US that would have to add on to it, and then that would move through. If we're taking that product, we're taking the peppers, and it's going to a commissary that's going to feed out to a bunch of grocery stores, that commissary has to track that information, and then because it's a transformation of the peppers, they would have to create a new tracking number or traceability lot number that would move that product. But it all has to be linked, assuming product was to stay in the US. And the thing the US has got that we don't have here, which is, thank God for this, is that in the US side of things, shipping to a store has to be tracked, and the store has to record it. We don't have to do that here, which is, we've always said kind of the corporate level of a retail location or a food service location. That's as far as the information needs to go, and then they can figure it out internally. In the US, it's one step further, so right to the back door of the store, and that's going to create some challenges.
And you can already see the complexity there. If your product is coming from, let's say your product is coming from India or Australia or different regions where you have a 12, 16, 24-hour time zone difference, meeting that 24 hours could be a challenge.
I have a quick question. These new rules from FSMA, I wonder what's the regulatory objectives is the regulator trying to meet here? Is it something that not being completed by existing rules, or I'm trying to understand the final objective of the regulator of what they're trying to achieve, because the data is there and it's evidence-based, so at the end of the day, if there is an issue, we would do the tracing of all those issues and come up with a root cause and other things. But is there any point of view from your perspective on what the regulatory objective is?
Yeah, so when FSMA was created, the idea was under FDA regulations, there wasn't really that same oversight. So say compared to USDA, where they would have an inspector on site at every location. And the FDA looked into it a bit further and said, well, HACCP isn't really good enough. We feel that there's other areas that we need to focus on. So intentional adulteration, for example, allergens, foreign supplier verification programs. So this is, I guess, the next step from the creation of FSMA. And I guess that's why it's called 204, because the FDA believed that the systems or the products that they managed or had oversight over wasn't being managed well enough.
I also think there was from the public, I guess the image within the FDA was the time to conduct a recall. Mm-hmm. And there have been so many recalls with the lettuce and spinach and the different types of products that's helped, really help. And I know Frank Yanis was pushing for, when he was in the FDA, pushing to have that, traceability really sped up in terms of the time. So there have been a lot of pressure publicly and even from a political standpoint that it's really important to have that traceability globally. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This was excellent. Thank you. Good to see you, Jeff.